Hello. So I am going to continue on with the introduction in Robert Johnson's book, Inner Work. And the last video, I believe, cut off at the final part of this sentence where he is giving an excerpt from Jung's book, Memories, I believe. I looked it up in the last one. Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, and it'll be referenced as MDR. Again, so it's a good excerpt, so I'm just going to start from the beginning of that excerpt and then continue on with the introduction. So he says, I was never able to agree that the dream is a facade behind which its meaning lies hidden, a meaning already known but maliciously, so to speak, withheld from consciousness. To me, dreams are part of nature, which harbors no intention to deceive, but expresses something as best as it can, just as a plant grows or an animal seeks its food as best it can. These forms of life, too, have no wish to deceive our eyes, but we may deceive ourselves because our eyes are short-sighted. Long before I met Freud, I regarded the unconscious and dreams, which are its direct exponents, as natural processes to which no arbitrariness can be attributed, and above all, no legerdemain. And last time when it cut off, I looked up that word, legerdemain, and that means trickery or deceit. So just further on with this whole point of this excerpt, or this paragraph, Jung was saying that the unconscious and dreams, which are the direct exponents of those dreams, are natural processes that are not arbitrary in any way, shape, or form, and above all, they have no attributes of deception or trickery. They're very straightforward and very meaningful. So he has, again, that word respect, a deep respect for them. So moving forward, we may compare a dream to a screen on which the unconscious projects its inner drama. We see there the various inner personalities that make up much of our total character, the dynamics among the forces that make up the unconscious. These invisible forces and their activities set off charges, so to speak, that are transmitted onto the screen. They take the form of images, and the interplay of the dream images gives us an exact representation of those inner dynamics that go on inside us. In learning how to understand these images, our conceptual starting point is our realization that they are not to be taken literally. We learn to look for an attitude, an inner personality, an inner development or conflict that clothes itself in the form and color of this image, so that it may be visible to us in the land of dreaming. And I've already started writing my dreams down. Last night I went to bed and set the intention to have 100% total dream recall, because I had heard that somewhere. If you set that intention before sleep, it can help you with your dream recovery or dream recall, but as soon as you wake up you have to write it down. I think I said this in the last video, or you might think that it was important enough that you're going to remember it vividly because it's so vivid right when you wake up, but then even just 5-10 minutes go by and you're just like, I have no idea what it was. So I wrote down my dream from last night. I woke up like random, like 4:30 in the morning or something like that, and I had a weird dream. It was like a kitten with one eye, and it had no face. It had the face, but it was just fur. Like, it's totally weird. It was really small, and I've been wanting a kitten really bad, but I had thought about it recently. And this cat, it was in the kitchen with my dogs. We have 2 dogs, and like my pug was dragging the little cat around the kitchen by its tail, but it was alive still. I was like, hey, don't do that. And I went to go rescue this little kitten, and it jumped from the floor up to my right here, and it took a big, tried to bite my face off, and I was like, ah! It was like one of those low-budget movies, I guess it was. And so I walked out the door, and it was in an apartment complex, but it wasn't mine. Isn't it crazy how sometimes dreams you could be living somewhere, you know it's home, but it's not any home that you know. And there was 4 flights of stairs, and I was taking this cat. He was chilling when I was taking him downstairs, taking him all the way down all these flights of stairs to put him at the bottom and leave him there. And there was these strewn about old lawn furniture, chairs and stuff, and I put a lawn furniture chair right there so I would keep him down there, and so he wouldn't come up and back after me. And I noticed like on the second to last level there was a dog that was kind of chained up to the railing, and he was just chilling there sleeping, but I was like, I don't want the cat to get hurt by this guy, so I put him all the way down to the bottom. And that was that dream. So it's like, what the heck? So like he says here, don't take it literally. Right after that I had a dream about a ceremony. It was like at a school. I sensed that it was at a school. It was a graduation ceremony, but very distinctly I remember I was sitting in the back and everyone there in front of me, we were all adults. There was no young like students. And they were all like teachers. And the teacher in the front was kind of crying and saying like, but a good cry, and saying her goodbyes to everybody. And we were progressing through this graduation ceremony of some sort, and I have no idea what it was. And yeah, so it's like there's so much going on in this dream world, and those are just two in one night, but we go through so many dreams. So it wasn't 100% dream recall, but it was like more than I recalled recently. And yeah, it's really interesting. I have no idea what that means, but hopefully this book might help us get further along with that. It's like that movie Inception. And, you know, time moves so differently in that realm. You're accessing, I think it's like the fourth dimension, where there is no time. So a lot happens in a little bit of time, or in 8 hours. Moving forward, the next section is called Imagination and Symbols. We have said that dreams are the first of the two great channels of communication from the unconscious. The second is the imagination. It baffles many people at first to hear that the imagination is an organ of coherent communication, that it employs a highly refined, complex language of symbols to express the contents of the unconscious. Yet it is true. If we learn to watch it with a practiced eye, we discover that the imagination is a veritable stream of energy and meaningful imagery flowing from the unconscious most of the time. We may picture two conduits that run from the unconscious to the conscious mind. The first conduit is the faculty of dreaming. The second is the faculty of imagination. Dreaming and imagination have one special quality in common: their power to convert the invisible forms of the unconscious into images that are perceptible to the conscious mind. And that right there makes me think instantly of the pineal gland, the third eye, and how its functions are able to, your imagination through your third eye, how it has inside of it. I was just watching a video. It has retinas, it has, what is it called, rods and cones, just like our eyeballs do, but they're on the inside, so it's inverted. The pineal gland is like an inverted eyeball. It has rods and cones inside, it has water inside, everything that it would need to function like an eye. It's an eye for the imagination. And this is just like it says. The common quality of both dreaming and the imagination are their power to convert the invisible forms of the unconscious into images that are perceptible to the conscious mind. So doesn't that sound like an inner eye built in? Isn't that amazing? It's amazing. So the paragraph continues. This is why we sometimes feel as though dreaming is the imagination at work during sleep, and the imagination is the dream world flowing through us while we are awake. Just as the unconscious gives off charges of energy in the night that create patterns on the screen of the dream mind, the unconscious also functions during the waking hours. It emits a continual stream of energetic pulses that find their way to the conscious mind in the form of feelings, moods, and most of all, the images that appear in the imagination. Just as with dreams, the symbolic meanings of the images may be understood by the person who is willing to learn. That's key. Let's see if it's still recording. Hang on a second. Awesome! We are good. This camera has been trying me lately, so I'm going to keep making sure that it's still going. Alright, where was I? So yeah, it's all symbolic meanings of images that can be understood by the person who's willing to learn. The material that flows through the imagination takes many forms, from the frivolous to the visionary. At the bottom of the scale is the passive fantasy. This is the fanciful daydream that flits across the mind at odd times during the day, or sometimes distracts us for long periods of time. Such fantasies are mere entertainments or distractions that add nothing to consciousness. At the top of the scale is the visionary experience. and these words are italicized for emphasis, of passive fantasy versus the visionary experience. And the visionary experience, he says, is in which the active imagination and religious encounter merge. Active imagination is one way of using the imagination constructively to approach the unconscious. There are many other ways, including profound forms of meditation. Our culture in the 20th century has a tremendous collective prejudice against the imagination. It is reflected in the things people say. You are only imagining things, or that is only your fantasy, not reality. That's very true. Just like this whole concept of following your dreams or being a dreamer or something like that, someone whose ambitions in life are not concrete, sedentary, lawyer, doctor, teacher, officer, those things, which are great professions, but the person who wants to go after something like, say, my husband, a film career, or something like, which he also wants to change the world, someone like me, or the very few people that have that sprinkling, that inkling to change the world. It's like, wow, you're kind of out there. That's not possible. That's a fantasy. Well, guess what? The fantasy is actually something to be taken a little more seriously, something to be respected. But society which is trying to push us towards conformity, to control our actions and our activities. It's very interesting that our culture has a tremendous collective prejudice against the imagination. This comes back to full circle thinking about the condition of our third eye right now, or how it was. Everybody is moving more into spirit, which is more active use of this third eye, so it's making it less and less dormant. But over years, calcification through fluoride and whatnot has made it dormant, but now we're waking that puppy back up, and it's going against the grain here to do so. So, yeah, no, I'll keep going. I'm sorry. In fact, no one makes up anything in the imagination. Wow. The material that appears in the imagination has to originate in the unconscious. Imagination, properly understood, is a channel through which this material flows to the conscious mind. To be even more accurate, imagination is a transformer that converts the invisible material into images the conscious mind can perceive. The root word of imagination is the Latin word imago, meaning image. The imagination is the image-forming faculty in the mind, the organ that has the power to clothe the beings of the inner world in imagery so that we can see them. The imagination generates the symbols and images the unconscious uses to express itself. A long series of historical and psychological developments over the centuries have produced our current misunderstandings of what fantasy and imagination really are. We haven't the space here to recall all of those developments, but since the prejudice is so pervasive, it is worthwhile to look briefly at how fantasy and imagination were understood by our intellectual ancestors, the ancient Greeks. Our English word fantasy derives from the Greek word fantasia. The original meaning of this word is instructive. It means a making visible. It derived from a verb that means to make visible, to reveal. The correlation is clear. The psychological function of our capacity for fantasy is to make visible the otherwise invisible dynamics of the unconscious psyche. We find here in the psychology of the Greeks a fundamental insight that modern depth psychology has had to rediscover. The human mind is invested with a special power to convert the invisible realm into visible forms so that it can be seen in the mind and contemplated. The third eye and its critical importance. It's a built-in faculty for you to manifest this special power. It says right here, special power. You are a powerful being. You just have not been told your power. That's what we're learning here. Inner work. Discover your power through hidden truths. So exciting. Where was I? So yeah, the special power The human mind is invested with a special power to convert the invisible realm into visible forms so that it can be seen in the mind and contemplated. We call this invisible realm the unconscious. For Plato, it was the world of ideal forms. Other ancients thought of it as the sphere of the gods, the region of pure spirit. But all sensed one thing. Only our power to make images enables us to see it. For the Greeks, fantasia denoted this special faculty in the mind for producing poetic, abstract, and religious imagery. Fantasia is our capacity to make visible the contents of the inner world by giving them form, by personifying them. The Greeks took for granted the reality of the inner world, expressed as ideal forms or universal qualities that clothed themselves in the divine images of their gods. For them, fantasia was the organ by which that divine word spoke to the human mind. Very interesting. There's a gal on YouTube. Her channel is called Abbey Normals, A-B-B-Y, Normals, with an S. And she does channeling messages and spiritual kind of advice. She's got a cool channel. I like her approach. It wasn't like anything I was used to, so I watched one of her channelings, and she does exactly this. She relaxes her consciousness, and she has clients that do like a video session with her, and whatever their question is, something that they're wanting to work on or something that they want to heal about themselves, maybe they have a pain, she relaxes her consciousness and sees what comes to her. She says she asks a question mentally, but she actually says it out loud to walk the person through her practice, and she says anyone can do it. So she asks a question like, where is this pain? Show me this pain in your body. And then she addresses it. Something comes forward, and it'll come forward in the personified version. So it'll come through as a figure, and she'll see it in her mind's eye. She'll see the clothes, she'll describe it to you, she'll explain, oh yeah, it's like this, and oh, he's taking me somewhere. She'll ask a question, and it'll adopt traits and characteristics and all of these things, and that's what he's talking about when he says that the inner world speaks to you in symbols and ways that you need to respect. Have a conversation with it, have a dialogue with it, and she finds amazing things, and her imagination is so vivid. I was so impressed by it that sorry, I'm still looking to see if the thing is still recording, but it was so amazing. At one of them I was just like, I want to draw this, and maybe I'll bring it for another part of this. What her description is so vivid, her imagination is so active in a beautiful, beautiful way that I was like, let me try and draw what she said, because I would love to see that in a painting. And I'll show you what I came up with. It's truly awesome. Abbey Normals. So let's continue. Well, let me see how long this is. Hang on one second. Not too long. I'm so sorry. Whatever. That's all good. Like Corey Anderson says, less perfection, more authenticity. That's like something I need to put on my wall. Less perfection, more authenticity. I love that. He says it all the time. Just be yourself. Moving forward, we find here in the psychology of the Greeks a fundamental insight that modern depth psychology has had to rediscover. Now we're going to move forward. I actually read all of this. In European psychology, until at least medieval times, the image-forming capacity called imagination or fantasia was thought of as the organ that receives meanings from the spiritual and aesthetic worlds and forms them into an inner image that can be held in memory and made the object of thought and reasoning. In religion, the imaginative faculty was the legitimate path of religious inspiration, revelation, and experience. The fact that information entered the conscious mind through the imagination did not in any wise discredit it. It did not in any wise discredit it, for an experience of poetic imagination was conventionally regarded as accompanied by a belief in the reality of what is imagined. That's in the Oxford English Dictionary. It was perhaps the Elizabethan times that the other parallel meaning of fantasy began to take hold, a fictitious daydream, something fanciful and unreal. The word fancy was coined derived from fantasy, to mean something that is made up whimsically in the imagination as a mere entertainment. Unfortunately, this is the misunderstanding of the nature of imagination that we have inherited in the popular mind of our century. If we think about it even briefly, it should be clear how foolish it is to denigrate the imagination. Again, if we think about it even briefly, it should be clear how foolish it is to denigrate the imagination. Humans depend on the imagination's image-making power and its image symbols for poetic imagery, literature, painting, sculpture, and essentially all artistic, philosophical, and religious function. That's so true. We could not develop the abstract intelligence, science, mathematics, logical reasoning, or even language were it not for our capacity to generate these image symbols. This is why Newman, the author referred to previously, could say what was quoted earlier. The symbolic imagery of the unconscious is the creative source of the human spirit in all its realizations, and because the symbol-forming process of the unconscious is the source of the human spirit, language, whose history is almost identical with the genesis and development of human consciousness, always starts out as a symbolic language. Again, that's from Newman's book, The Great Mother. Active imagination, the conscious use of the imaginative faculty. Active imagination, like the unconscious, has always existed in human life, but as with many facets of our inner life, it took Jung to rediscover the lost art and make it available to modern people. At first glance, active imagination may seem too simple or naive to be taken seriously as a psychological technique. It consists in going to the images that rise up in one's imagination and making a dialogue with them, just like I was just saying with Abbey normals. It involves an encounter with the images. The conscious ego mind actually enters into the imagination and takes part in it. This often means a spoken conversation with the figures who present themselves, but it also involves entering into the action, the adventure or conflict that is spinning its story out in one's imagination. It is this awareness, this conscious participation in the imaginal event that transforms it from mere passive fantasy to active imagination. The coming together of conscious mind and unconscious mind on the common ground of the imaginal plane gives us an opportunity to break down some of the barriers that separate the ego from the unconscious, to set up a genuine flow of communication between the two levels of the psyche, to resolve some of our neurotic conflicts with the unconscious, and thus to learn more about who we are as individuals. I'm going to pause right here and come back.